You're listening to The Artist Athlete, episode 62. This podcast is dedicated to CIRCUS. It's a place for professionals in the industry to share their stories, viewpoints, and information, and a place for outsiders to get a sneak peek into this world. Hey friends, fans, and enemies, I'm Shannon McKenna. I'm the host of the Artist Athlete podcast and the founder of theartistathlete.com. Oh my gosh, I have been so excited to release this episode. I enjoyed recording it so much with Stacy Clark. Before I talk a little bit more about Stacy, I want to give a quick shout out, as always, to, my Patreons, the amazing people who pledge $1 or more every month to help me keep producing podcasts just like this one. The Artist Athlete podcast is super unique, guys. It's the only podcast I know of that gives weekly deep dives into the circus industry. I started this podcast because when I started Circus 11 years ago, I had no idea how to break into the industry. And there's still so many rumors, so much misinformation, so much secrecy around things that are actually pretty straightforward, like getting cast in Cirque du Soleil, which is what we're going to talk about with Stacy today. The reason that there's no information is just because nobody's making it. And the reason no one's making it is because it's very hard to find funding to create projects such as this one. And when I started out, I had such a belief that people would be interested in this topic. And all of my Patreons have really reinforced that belief by pledging to support me. So this podcast would not exist without them. And if you want to become one of them, support this podcast and support the information I'm trying to get out to the world, go to patreon.com/theartistathlete. As I said, you can pledge as little as $1. You'll get pretty cool Artist Athlete swag and a whole bunch of other neat stuff. So again, it's super easy. All payments are super secure. They go through PayPal. So one more time, patreon.com/theartistathlete. If you've been putting it off, now's the time. My guest today, as I mentioned before, is Stacy Clark. Stacy Clark was a former gymnast and professional circus performer. She worked in marketing and communications before leaving it all behind to perform and teach circus around the world on stage, at festivals, and on screen. In 2007, Stacy joined the casting department of Cirque du Soleil, where, as a talent scout, she recruited athletes and circus artists for the company's shows worldwide. In 2011, Stacy became the acrobatic coach on Amaluna, and 2 years later rejoined the acrobatic casting team in Montreal. She holds a Bachelor's of Applied Arts and is a certified performance enhancement specialist by the National Academy of Sports Medicine. Before I start this interview, I also want to say thank you to the people who follow me on Instagram. I'm at _artist_athlete on Instagram. And whenever I get big interviews like this one, I always like to put up an offering for people to suggest questions for me to offer guests. I put them in my stories. So thank you to everybody who contributed questions. At the end of this interview, I read a few, and Stacy says thank you as well. She really enjoyed all the awesome questions you asked. Here's my interview with Stacy Clark. Stacy Clark, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So what do you do?
At this point in my life, I am the director of casting, responsible for sourcing and recruitment at Cirque du Soleil. We have a really large, amazing team of just over 35 people working in casting in all different areas of specialty. And within that team, within that bigger department, I manage 3 teams. I have a team of scouts that includes a manager, and that's all the in-field work that specialists do across all the families of disciplines. So that's singing, acting, clown, dance, acrobatics, sport-based stuff, as well as circus arts, which is really varied, of course.
And so and by scouts, you mean people who go out?
That is correct.
Okay,
yeah.
gotcha.
We're all principally based here, 2 exceptions. We have 2 talent scouts home-based in France. But essentially, the scouts are the people who go out into the world, find and nourish contacts and develop their networks in the various disciplines, and then they bring that talent back to us. One of the other teams that I manage, it's sort of divided in 2. Half of them are here in Montreal, half are in Vegas to support the resident shows in Las Vegas, and they are advisors. So advisors are the ones who take all of that amazing talent in our database, research and sift through it, and then select the short list that we present to the shows anytime there's a need on a show.
Okay. So it sounds like the flow is you have scouts who find the talent, and then there's the advisors who will take what the scouts have found and kind of process it through what the needs of the company are, and then present that to, I guess, directors, or who makes the final decision about who would be selected to replace someone in O, for example?
That's a great question because it's a little bit unique to Cirque du Soleil and it's different from industry standard. The way things work here, largely due to the huge volume of shows and, of course, the number of positions on each show. We have presently just over 1,300 active artists.
Wow.
That's a lot of volume when it comes to just pure humans. So the way it works is that we will shortlist and recommend and present the material of select candidates who fit the profile depending on the need of the casting call.
Okay.
And from there, it's either the artistic director and or senior artistic director. Every show that travels has an artistic director, and we have 3 senior artistic directors that are responsible for those traveling shows, the touring shows, we call them. And they have actually a number of shows in their portfolio because they're responsible for a bigger picture, zoom out version of the show. Whereas the AD is active on the show, traveling with the show, very much immersed in their show.
What would the bigger picture look like? Is that like who you need long-term and short-term? Or
it's really everything you can imagine, from the touring plan, not the planning of, but the big picture touring plan, the overall governance of show quality, making sure that the shows themselves, despite potential cast changes and despite any other potential natural things that occur in live entertainment, live performance, that the show integrity is upheld and respected. Sure. So they really have quite an important job in terms of the critical eye. Whereas the AD, who also contributes to that very actively, also is very much in the operations. So they travel full-time with their show.
Okay.
All of that to say that those are the decision makers when it comes to selecting the final candidate for an open position. And that's all to do with shows that are what we call in diffusion, which is an appropriated word from French. It just means shows in operation.
Okay.
Out there already doing their thing. And all of that is true, but treated a little bit differently when we have a new creation. And in the world of new creations, we have a director of creation and a stage director who typically together make the final choice for their cast.
Is there a certain type of person that you would look for creation as opposed to someone who could fill a role very quickly?
The answer is yes and no. I think that it goes without saying that creations need someone who's very generous and need the type of artist who's prepared to go into lesser known spaces. Things are very much in creation right up until they premiere and often afterward as well, until the show really grows its roots. So there definitely needs to be a certain spirit in that person that they can come into the environment and contribute. So we look for generous people and open-minded people and creative people and people who want to offer. That tends to be the large majority of artists just by nature.
Yeah.
You know, that's not exceptional in our world, but it is particular. Whereas with the replacement role, we already have a really clear idea. It's quite a defined role that has been established sometimes for decades almost with our long-running shows. And so an artist will come in and it will be up to them to actually learn and adapt into the existing role, whether that has character and choreography and music and costume choices, etc. They have to take their essence and pour it into the known character, known role. So it's quite a different experience. Doesn't mean the same person can't do it. We have lots of artists who've done both. We've had them do it in reverse order, where they've been cast in a role that has been very much just a simple transfer of skills for them, or perhaps as basic as a transfer of music piece. And then after a few years, wish to have that experience of being part of a new creation. And so start at zero and go to scratch.
Yeah.
Dive into a new team, new process. It's very demanding. It's intense. It's very fiery. But it's also, I think, incredibly enriching for people who want to be able to be immersed in something and be contributing to something out of the gate.
What's the frequency in turnover? I would imagine, like any other company, you would probably want to retain employees or artists or anyone as long as possible. How frequently do you turn over people, artists specifically?
That really depends by discipline. It varies tremendously. We've had musicians on shows since their inception.
Wow.
So we're talking years and years and years, like a career's worth of being on a show. That's more true of a resident show, but it's not exclusively resident. We have had people on tour with us for eons, whether it's show to show or a singular show with a long lifespan. Because, of course, they don't really change in the same way that an acrobat might change, both physically and with their performance skill set. If anything, they actually continue to evolve and get better. And we joke about certain disciplines, clowning would be included, where, like a good wine, they get better with age. We also know that high performance athletes and artists don't do that. That's our reality, is that there is a particular period of time in a high performance individual's life where they will peak and be at their finest physical self. And we have to take best advantage of that, and hopefully they do too.
Sure.
In that, I can say that we have acrobats and artists working well into their 40s. We tend to give some consideration to age at the time of a first hire, just to ensure that there is longevity. That doesn't mean we in any way preclude an older acrobat from being considered, because oftentimes an acrobat in their late 30s, early 40s looks like they're in their 20s, and they're fit as all get out, so they can totally do the job for another decade. It's kind of wonderful. Similarly, if an athlete artist takes really good care of themselves from the beginning of their career, they can go and go and go. And that means if it's their choice to renew after every end of contract period, then so be it. If their performance is what it needs to be and everyone's happy, we will just keep renewing them.
That's so interesting. That was a huge question a lot of people asked, was, is there an age cutoff for casting?
I can dive into that a little bit more if you like, because it is an important one, and it's a sensitive one in the sense that I can relate to it. I started circus really late. I was 26 when I first got on a flying trapeze. I did have an athletic background. I was a gymnast, so it all came rather quickly and naturally. But that's already, in some cases, toward the end of a particular artist's career. If someone's been in that world for their whole life, they may well be starting to look at other options at age 26, not just getting started. But it really, really varies on the individual. I think what's important is to put a higher level of significance on someone's overall fitness and wellness state. I think there's a lot to be said for a mature artist, someone who can come in and be a good leader and exhibit good human qualities that help guide younger people who are still perhaps in that phase of learning who they are and what life has to offer. So I think there's a lot of values and non-physical related things that an older, more mature person can bring. The reality is 10 shows a week is hard work, and you have to be ready to attack that. That can even occasionally go up to 12 if we have a 6-pack weekend where there's a 3-show Saturday and a 3-show Sunday. So it's really important that when your body is your vessel, it needs to be taken care of. And if you do a good job of it, we don't really care what age you are.
I know that you go to all the, the big schools every year and see their end of the year shows. And then I know scouts go to different gymnastics events and things like that. Are there any other places you look for acrobats? I'm thinking particularly about like the speed juggler in Lucia, or, you know, like those kinds of disciplines where you're like, where did you find these people? Where do you scout?
That answer is different today than, say, 10 years ago, thanks in part to the ease with which people can put material up online.
Sure.
But we don't use that first as a tactic, because once it's up online, everyone's seen it. And by then, it's been seen, possibly too much.
Oh, interesting. So what do you mean by that?
Well, we do use YouTube when we need to. It's very, very easy to access it like a giant library with adequate research to be able to dig in and find things that people have chosen to put up. But it can be so uninteresting quickly when something has had its moment in the spotlight, and what could have been a novelty and evolved further suddenly just becomes, you know, every aunt and uncle sends it to you saying, hey, look at this cool thing. Well, I have seen it. I've seen it a couple of years ago, and now it's going viral, you know. But we have to acknowledge that access to media has actually helped our job a great deal.
Sure.
More specifically, having access on your phone and for artists to be able to film themselves during their trainings and capture things so much more easily than back in the day, that has enabled them also to position themselves and sell themselves much more easily than in the past. But our true spirit, the heart of it, is traveling the world and literally the four corners. We have people who go on every continent. I just came back from a long trip to Australia and Vietnam, in fact. We have a particular scout who's based out of France, who's done a lot of work in Africa in these last couple of years. As a consequence, we have 4 different shows with Ethiopian artists in them, which is new to us in these last couple of years.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it's wonderful. The diversification and the new style, and the new to us at least, style and spirit that this type of artist will bring is the very same impact, for example, as going to Latin America and finding a speed juggler who is authentically from a family circus and has been doing this his whole life and brings with him a whole toolkit that is entirely different than an artist who went to school in Europe for 3 or 4 years. It's a totally different aesthetic. It's a different philosophy, different style.
It feels different on stage to watch it completely.
That's right. It reads differently. So we disperse. We do anywhere between 75 and 100 events per year. We call them actions because they're basically casting initiatives that could be covering a festival, covering a sport competition, holding an audition. That's another really important piece that I'll speak to in a minute. Developing relationships and partnerships worldwide so that we can have people channel and funnel potential candidates to us.
So it's like a scout has people who kind of funnel people to the scout. I see.
Very much. Yeah. In fact, one of the most important things in a scout job, like as a scout, you want to develop your network. You want to have people who work with you to be able to bring great suggestions to the table. Because at the end of the day, we still can't be everywhere all the time.
Sure.
And I can also openly say that today's budgets don't allow for it. It's not realistic for us to be constantly traveling the world. It's just no company operates in that fashion anymore, and nobody's that flush. So we have to be really strategic about where we go, why we're going, what the objectives are of going there, and what additional benefits can come from being there. Are we going to be nearby to a show that we could stop in and see, given that they're so far away on the road often? Is it a really great hotbed of a certain type of talent that needs a bit of extra development? And do we need to get in there and give some additional support? We have a next gen program, which is quite new, and it's very much with that in mind, that spirit of going in early and detecting talent and helping channel them toward what it is that we need. Should that interest them, here are the tools.
Oh, interesting.
Mentoring, coaching, this kind of stuff.
Where does that next gen program generally go? Or
currently, the next gen program, which is, as I said, it's like early talent development. We have 4 partnerships. We're looking to expand that gradually over the coming years. We kicked that off in 2019, and we are aligned with San Diego Circus Center. We are aligned with a spot in Portugal, which is combination acro sport, acrobatic gymnastics training space, and a small circus school. We have something new kicking off, and in fact, as we speak this week, we have 2 scouts present at the Budapest Circus Festival, And so in keeping with that, we have a training center in Budapest and the Budapest Circus School, who are part of our Next Gen program. And finally, we have a new one that is going to open its doors on the 8th of February, and that's in Avignon, France. Nice. And it's a brand new training space that will be multidisciplinary.
Very cool. Yeah. Also, a really good reason to go to Budapest, because I wanted to go for a really long time. That's
exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah,
wow.
There's some very interesting stuff happening over there. And that's true of many pockets in the world. Once you immerse yourself and start to understand what is the network, what is the trend and tendency, what are the typical profiles like in that part of the world, that's where we can dig in and say, okay, let's nurture this, because this is something that we need. We call them sometimes at-risk profiles. Certain types of...
But it's good to be at risk in this situation.
It's good to be at risk. It's not risky. It's to do with, we don't have enough of you, and it's a very popular discipline in high demand, and we need to train and nurture more artists to go in that direction.
Oh, interesting.
So in the case of Budapest, they already have a lot of great coaching ability in the cradle area, Korean, Russian, static cradle. And so we are aligning with them to do some coaching sessions and really just encourage and develop the development of flyers and porters in the world of cradle.
Really cool. You mentioned Ethiopia as another kind of at-risk area, maybe?
Well, in fact, it was untapped in that case. There are certain territories in the world where they are more untapped for us.
Oh, I see.
When we refer to at-risk, it tends to be based on the company's needs. What does Cirque du Soleil need, and what do we find we don't often have enough of? When it comes to Ethiopia and other territories that have been not as richly explored, that's basically untapped potential. So what we've been able to do is identify over the course of many years different regions in the world where we want to channel some effort. We get a sense that stuff's happening over there. We have a little bit of intel. We're learning and developing partnerships in the right places. And we see that there's a lot of talent that just needs to be exposed. We need to look at it.
What are the other regions?
Well, Brazil actually has a great deal of talent. And every couple of years,
South America,
Argentina, Latin America is really quite amazing in that way. Very different style, often emerging from social circus, and sort of, we see these fabulous videos of kids tumbling in their dirt roads and bare feet. It's kind of extraordinary, but there's a lot of natural talent. So that's a place that we like to canvas. Every region has its thing, its specialty. But if you like, I'd like to swing around to auditions, because auditions are such a big one.
Too.
Good. So auditions, if we had our druthers, if we had unlimited budgets, we would be holding auditions all the time. And that would be like our go-to number one vehicle for drawing in new talent. But there's a few interesting things that have happened over the last few years. And one of those things is that not everybody likes to audition. And I don't speak so much to circus artists who've already made a choice to direct themselves into the world of live performance, but I speak to other types of disciplines that we convert into circus performance. So when we think of athletes, when we think of urban or extreme athletes, we think of different kinds of...
like a parkour, BMX biker,
exactly,
something like that.
Exactly. Unlike a dancer whose life it is to audition, or an actor, and even to some degree circus artists, it's typical that is your gateway into a company. There's a lot of different disciplines that don't know how to do that. They don't know about it. It's not part of their culture. And in some cases, they're just not interested. That's also true of some territories where, by virtue of the culture, they don't really like to audition in the style that we offer it, because what we tend to do is audition for our data bank. And when we talk about the scouts going out into the four corners of the world and drawing in talent, they're very rarely drawing it in for an immediate job. The likelihood is there will be jobs coming. That's why we're out there constantly looking. But we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know exactly when, always. And we need to constantly be at the ready. So we are database hunting. We're basically building out our database so that when the need does arise, the advisors we spoke of can dive into that database and pull out the very best. But it's not always aligned with either the life cycle of certain disciplines and sports, for example, at the end of an Olympic cycle for an athlete, they are in their prime physical fitness. The likelihood is they actually need to take a little break and rest their body and, get life aligned and maybe mourn a little the conclusion of their amateur sport career. But if we wait too long, they've gone off into a new career. They've perhaps gone back to school. They've probably gotten out of shape because they're not training at that same intensity anymore. And it means that there's a fine window, like a tiny little window in there where we need to get in there and make available something for them.
Which can be so tricky because the company also has needs and requests.
We never know. And so we're sort of doing this juggling act all the time where we need to say, what does this particular discipline or this particular territory need? What do they respond best to? Are they someone who wants to just wait it out and be casual enough that when the phone call comes, they're happy to jump aboard? Sure, in some cases. And in some particular cases, even it could be a socioeconomic situation. They don't have a lot of other terrific opportunities. They might be doing a short-term job just to sort of make ends meet, and they're still waiting on that next big opportunity. In other cultures, it's really much more expected that you would go to university and get a job. And so running away to join the circus is not necessarily front of mind, no matter how great an artist or an athlete you are. So we have to adapt and really try our best to understand what all these different regions are telling us. And to circle it back to auditions, we do the traditional auditions as often as we can because it's a great way to meet people. We get to see what they have to offer, but we get to observe and we get to talk and we get to understand the person behind the act or the person behind the artist. And it really helps us understand better who it is that we're putting on a short list eventually, who we're considering for a role, because we really are considering human beings at the end of the day.
It kind of speaks to what you were saying before about the maturity of an artist as well as their capacity physically.
Very much. So in audition, for example, we will observe how well people listen, take notes, interact with others, make new friends, move a mat for somebody, step up when something's needed and offer themselves. We will observe if someone feels shy and can't get past it. It's okay to feel shy, but the reality is if you're going to be on stage, shyness is not necessarily your best asset. So we need to understand that you can get past that you can go into a room and really let the best of yourself shine and be a good person that people want to be around. That's what makes a great cast member. So we'll observe all that kind of stuff in audition and be able to really hone in and see, okay, is this a one-trick wonder who showed us a fantastic video, but that's because they've got really strong video editing skills, not because they have a robust vocabulary on their apparatus of choice.
Sure.
We can kind of dive through those layers a little bit. But now, I would add that we are starting to modify auditions to shape them a little bit more like a workshop, because we're understanding too that artists really, they tend to come away from our auditions. We're very proud of this, actually. It's a sidebar, but artists typically will come away from one of our auditions really feeling good, whether they made it in or not. And we try really hard to create a positive culture and to create an environment and an experience that's meaningful for them. Because if you are not maybe ready yet, it doesn't mean that you won't be ready in 2 years' time, and you'll have been through it and you'll know what to expect, and you can take care of things accordingly and set your sights to do better the next time.
Yeah, that's such a good point, because a lot of people, I think, don't audition because they don't feel ready or they don't know. And so the question is, do I wait until I can present my best self, or do I just show up as I am now?
It's kind of it's a hybrid of both. And I think what we're learning is that by shifting toward workshop style, we can build people into the experience in a more meaningful way, and they have more to take away at the end as well. We want it to be reciprocally beneficial. So we're trying to have it not be with, that sort of intimidating panel necessarily. And of course, thanks to TV shows and judging and that sort of perception of like, here's the nice guy and here's the not so nice guy and here's the one who bounces between the two. We really try to humanize it and actually give people an experience where they can bring themselves, their best selves. But to answer your question more specifically, you do need to be ready. There's no doubt about it. Most of our auditions are by invitation. So you have to be ready enough that we will invite you in the first place. We just don't have the luxury of filtering out too many people who are not yet in the professional sphere. So you need to be ready. But I think we could liken it to many other things, including probably parenthood and like big moments in life. Are you really ever ready, ever, for anything?
Oh my God, no.
Nobody's, you're never going to reach that.
I was ready to get out of bed this morning. Yeah, sure.
That's being human,
That's
right?
A great point, yeah.
I think you need to be able to set a sight, have a target and a goal that is clear for you, and do everything you can to get to that place. If someone actually showed up an audition and thought they were already everything they could be, that would be problematic for us, because we also evaluate potential.
Wow.
I want to know that we see something in you, that there is something in you that's going to take you even further than any of us know right now. But we have a glimmer of it. We see that you've come this far, that you're quite awesome, but that there's all these other things that still have room to grow.
We've talked a lot about how you become an artist for Cirque du Soleil. How do you become a talent scout or the head of casting for Cirque du Soleil? How does that happen?
Well, I'll give you my quick trajectory, and then I'll speak to some of the people on my team. I was an artistic gymnast for many, many years. I went on to university.
Is that rhythmic or?
No, that's the 4 apparatus that women do.
Balance
6 for men.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Floored.
Exactly.
Yes.
And I went on to university. I started a different career altogether in marketing and advertising, and I worked in that field for 6 or 7 years. And as I mentioned earlier, I discovered flying trapeze one day down at Harbourfront in Toronto, and it was the beginning of the end. So I juggled a circus life and a professional life for a few years.
Pun intended, I'm sure.
Quite. It was a bit of a juggle. I took a couple leave of absences to do some tours and some work and some fun stuff. And then I realized I really just need to bite the bullet and get going here and dive into this world if I'm going to do it at all. And so I did. And I just sort of never looked back. I ended up spending a decade with a performing partner and doing other kinds of stuff. But our principal body of work was a 2-person comedic aerial show.
Oh, fun.
Yeah,
that's great.
It literally was the most fun I've ever had. Like, it's so hard work, so much hard work, but so fun. And we had a really lovely time of it. And then when we were looking to hang up our tights, I happened upon, and perhaps it's because of my Montreal roots, born and raised here, I happened upon a job posting for a talent scout. And it just seemed to me that it was the happy marriage of all the things I had done in my life up to that point. And I guess they thought the same thing, because I was offered the job as acrobatic talent scout, and that dates back 12 years now. I worked within the casting department for nearly 4 years. And around that time, I think I was just getting a bit itchy, having gone from totally freelance for a decade to something that was actually quite regular. And as much as it was super interesting and involved travel, and I identify as a talent scout. I love being that. It's very meaningful for me. But at the time, I was just maybe getting a bit itchy. And I had the opportunity to work on the new creation of Anna Luna and then go off on tour with them as a coach. So that's what I did. And that was also fantastic for a whole other set of reasons. And then I came back to casting.
Oh, wait, can you, for real quick, just tell what the role of a coach is on a touring show?
The role of coach is, let's say, friend, mother, sister, psychologist, technical assessor, support, shoulder to cry on, someone who's there to guide. If you think of coach more in the realm of what corporate coaching speaks to, when you empower and enable and create an environment for, have a standard of practice that will enable, that's more what a coach is at Cirque du Soleil, as compared to, say, a gymnastics coach who is literally getting in there and breaking skills down to the nth degree in order that you can teach somebody something from nothing. What's different in our world, of course, by the time we are coaching in a professional environment, is that people know how to do what they do already. It's more a question of guiding them to optimize that to its fullest. And that comes with not just the coaching of the artist, it comes with the human being. And when you're on tour 24/7, there's a lot of human being stuff that needs tending to.
Sure.
Separate from what happens in the artistic tent and separate from what happens on stage. So that was pretty interesting. And I really learned such a great amount that I was very happy to bring back to casting. Having been on tour at last with Cirque du Soleil, as compared to my personal past experience touring with other small companies, including my own, I really was able to speak to the experience of, okay, I know what I'm putting an artist into when we cast them into one of our shows. So that was really beneficial. And I came back and then just started a bit of a different path. I became a team lead and then a team manager. And then as our department evolved and was restructured, I set my path a little bit differently, and I stepped back from talent scouting in the field and ultimately became director. So now there's occasions where I get to scout still, and I still, as I mentioned, identify as a scout. I still feel like I wear the Cirque du Soleil goggles pretty much all the time, which is why I love to see things that are not circus on stage, because I can't just enjoy circus in the normal way always.
Did you hate that? Yeah.
Yeah, we're too inside it, right?
No,
You're
it's
just
awful.
Inside all the detail, and it's like, so I like to go see totally
my
other
friends
things.
who are not circus, like my parents, they hate seeing circus with me now because I'm like, oh, but why did they choose that? And that's so weird. Oh, she messed up on that, like all of that. Yeah.
All those subtle reactions, because you know that that person just recovered from something incredibly adeptly, but still you're like, oh, yeah.
That's it.
So yeah, I still wear those glasses, that's for sure. But now I find it really fun. I'm circling back to my coach experience, actually, and I'm using that a lot more professionally with my team. So I put a lot of focus on the wellness and the proficiency of my team. I have a really high-performing team. I'm so thrilled with our department and what we do, and the people who are in it, and the passion they exhibit, and the commitment they exhibit. It's just a really fun place to be.
It sounds like such a fun job, too.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I'm like, maybe I don't want to be an artist for you. Maybe I just scout. I want to ask some questions from my friends on Instagram. So, what is the most difficult discipline to cast? Someone asked.
Neat. These are going to be good questions.
I'll try to there's some really good ones. I've got some smart people listening.
Most difficult. It's more about the profile, I would say, than the discipline. I could broad stroke and say we never really have enough hoop divers. We never really have enough teeterboard jumpers. We never really have enough 42 kilo female flyers. Those are tricky disciplines. Where we actually struggle the most, I would say, or where we have our biggest challenges, is when we have a completely invented profile. So that might fall in the case of a musician or a singer, let's say, or perhaps it's a really specific vision that a director has for a particular character or an actor or a clown, and they just haven't been sparked by anyone we've shown yet, and they have something in their head that we need to try to extract and go find. Those are the ones that are trickiest. At the end of the day, we can mostly tap into the disciplines themselves. We can also make the effort to train the disciplines themselves. If we know we have a fantastic trampolinist, well, we will bring them through our training program and train them on teeterboard. And we've made some of the best jumpers in the world that way. So it's usually things like, for example, little people on Corteo or in Curious. Little people and Lilliputians come from a particular region in the world that we visited a couple times, and they are a very special population, some of whom are interested in acting and some of whom are not. There's just not that many of them to begin with.
Sure.
And so finding the ones that want to be on stage, that can be tricky. So it's the nuanced profiles that we create that are the most tricky.
Gotcha. So it's really your own making.
Yeah, we do our own selves in. Yeah.
Great. Okay. So how much does appearance play in casting? Obviously, you have to have, people of a certain weight and certain height if you're going to throw them around 10 shows a week. But as far as like hair color, tattoos, things like that, do you look past that? Is that something to take into consideration?
Not really, no. Unlike modeling where they'll say, don't staple your face because it'll not get you the contract with Revlon or whatever. The most sensitive area within that question typically is weight. So I'm going to address it head on. Yes, we do look for physical profiles that have a certain aesthetic. Can't lie about that. Does that preclude someone who's built a certain way, who's amazing at what they do, from being considered? No, not if the profile allows for it. But if the profile calls for a very petite male or female, because you are in fact the one getting chucked up onto the top of a floor high,
right?
Well then, there are some very real physical constraints that have to be considered. As regards personal choices, like what you do to your hair, skin, etc., not an issue. To the point where we've actually talked about that quite recently around the trend in the last, say, just under a decade, where they're show me an artist who's not tattooed. That's pretty much where we're at as compared to, oh my God, this person has a tattoo.
Right.
We used to take photos of tattoos. We don't even bother anymore. We don't really care for the most part. If it were wildly inappropriate, then that would be a consideration. But
that might speak to a person's...
Well, precisely. That's a deeper, more underlying issue. But there's makeup for that. There's costume technology for that. Some shows do require a particular hairstyle. Corteo's the one best known for it. They want people, men in particular, to grow out their hair. They tend to have longer looking hair because it matches the character they play on stage.
And that's cheaper than wigs too, I'd imagine.
Very much.
Yeah.
We do use a lot of wigs when that is part of the character's costume design. There are other occasions where, particularly in the realm of musicians, typically, there is an assigned haircut. So the haircuts are covered for you. They're taken care of. Hair color is taken care of. But it is prescribed. It has to be that way. How you look when you came in, we don't necessarily care. We will get you to the place that you need to be for that character.
Also, I think another sensitive topic, which is race. In certain shows, obviously, like I'm thinking of Dralion specifically, like there are kind of roles that are very prescribed about race. But how much are you conscious of presenting a diverse cast? Or is that an effort that you guys make? Or is it... It also seems like the casting pool would be so limited in some cases that might be a difficult thing to achieve.
Yes and yes is the answer. We're very conscious of it. We don't always succeed in the way that we would like, not because we don't try. And that's not a defensive stance so much as if I could see more diversity across all different discipline types, it would be a non-issue. It just doesn't exist. That's a fact. There is a disproportionate amount of men to women. Now, obviously, if we hone in on aerials, the opposite is true. But when you step back and you look across all disciplines, there's more men typically than women. There are more, I wouldn't even uniquely say Caucasians, but I can tell you that in order, our talent pool comes from US, Canada, Russia, France, in big chunks, and in that order, and then a multitude of other countries that span across Europe and Latin America and Asia. Here's an example. Yes, we had a lot of Chinese acrobats in Dralion because we worked with the Chinese Performing Arts Agency and the show was designed in that manner. However, we don't actually have access to Chinese acrobats in the same manner that we have access to acrobats or artists from any other place in the world. They are governed by this agency.
Right.
And so we either engage in a contract with that agency and bring in a troupe, or we don't have Chinese artists, is
interesting.
The very general glimpse of it. We would love to get into certain new territories more consistently and bring in that ethnic diversity. And we really do succeed in some cases, but really not as much as we would like. And it does translate. If you just look at the 4 countries that I've named, well, within their demographic, they skew very heavily Caucasian. Mm-hmm. So of course, proportionally, it's going to skew to that. But we do make an effort in terms of awareness. What we won't do is cast a lesser than artist to make up for some type of deficit. Nor will we get into heavy equity issues, like if I have an apple and an apple, by virtue of wanting to hire a minority, will I select that other artist? No, I will select the best artist for the profile as it's been defined. And if that leads us to someone of color, then that's fantastic. That's a director's choice. There are tons and tons of roles where ethnicity does not matter at all, and we are delighted to just put whomever in, and it all shakes out the way it needs to. In other instances, there's some roles that are not even gender specific. And so when we can, we'll say this is a great opportunity to put a woman into this role because that's going to help the balance in the cast. We want to have that different kind of energy. It doesn't impact the character or the role or the delivery of the skill set. So we have an awareness, all right, but also the market tends to rule this one.
The market in terms of what's available to you to cast? Or
Exactly.
I see.
The market of artists, the talent pool of artists worldwide, they themselves, we ourselves, I still identify a little bit, we have an imprint.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
it's either by territory and ethnic origin, sometimes it is by gender, but the reality is the people who get into this line of work tend to look a certain way.
And okay, this is a rumor that I heard, but I think do you only hire contortionists from Mongolia?
No.
Someone told me that once. Okay, great.
A lot of them are actually from Russia. We have one gal who is American. No, more than one, actually. But I would say in order, the truth is Mongolia, because of their physiological
it's
morphology, it's absolutely first and foremost. When it comes to contortionist hand balancers, though, that tends to skew toward Eastern Europe.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Age. Lots of people asking about age.
Age is just a number. Show me how fit you are and how awesome you are, and we won't care.
That's it. Oh, someone asked, how much of this is politics? Is it is me sitting across from you right now going to help my career?
That's interesting. I love these questions because it gives me a sense of what people are really thinking, and we need to understand that better to demystify the process. No, it's not. We look absolutely first and foremost. If you envision a pyramid, no, I'm going to change that vision. It's not even a pyramid, it's a stack. Imagine a smokestack. And the very bottom of it, the base of it that's supporting all of its height is technique. You have to be really good at what you do. You have to have a really, really solid technique that will not only make you good now, but make you better as we help to train you. So that is number one. If you have that and you are a miserable individual to be around, the reality is we are still going to consider you up until a certain point. However, if someone is almost as good as you and they're a wonderful human being, trust me, they will be appreciated a great deal more. And that is the next level, in my opinion, in this smokestack. It's all of the values and attributes that you bring as a human being, including your coachability and your openness and how willing you are to learn and grow and expand. Because the third block is artistry. And I used to maybe inverse artistry and human beingness, but the reality is
then you went on tour and had to live with these people.
I think that's exactly what it was. I experienced firsthand what it means to be around people 24/7. And you just want to be around good people. And it can be your unique value system. It doesn't mean that everyone's the same, but you do need to bring all the good cards to the game. Artistry is really important because for all of the technique, if you can't emote and share and deliver something in your performance, well, the audiences are going to see right through that and they'll get very tired of something that probably on a technical level they can't fully comprehend anyway.
Yeah.
We joke and say, where's the triple? But it's really only if the triple is delivered with enough pizzazz that you can touch anyone of any age and any walk of life. And that's all of the packaging around. It's musicality and Doesn't mean you have to be a dancer if, in fact, you're an acrobat, but you have to move well. You have to know how to put music in your body. You need to understand how to express and connect and convey what it is that the director has set out for you in their show line. So artistry is a really significant piece. And for me, it grows up, because without the bottom block, those other things are all nice to haves, but if you don't actually have the technique, this is not the right place for you. We will often say that we're using just a percentage of what an artist's true potential is, because for them to be able to deliver it 10 shows per week, you can't possibly be outputting at your 100% mark every single show. It's just not possible.
No.
We don't have the luxury of tapering like in sport, where you have a season and you build up to it, and then you have your peak performance, and then you cool down from it and rest and recover and restart the cycle. We're out there every single day and putting shows on it virtually every night. And so we need to bring people to a place that they can stay happy and healthy and consistent. And to do that, you need to have the technique underscoring all of it.
Cool. Yeah, that was another question people asked, is how much do you take into account technique and how much is artistry?
Yeah. So. But I would never underestimate potential and willingness to learn and commitment to growth, because those are all qualities that come with the solid base that you can bring. Understanding that over your career, you should be getting better. You should end your career a better artist than when you started.
I love that. Someone asked, this is very specific, so I'm interested to hear your response. I'm a self-taught performing aerialist, 35 years old. Do I have a chance if I apply?
Chances are lesser than a 22-year-old graduate of an international circus school. But the answer is not no.
Great. Whoever submitted that, you heard you heard it here first. How do you get invited to an audition?
Usually what we'll do is promote an audition and solicit applications. We also will dig through our database, and one of the evaluation boxes that we check is akin to audition to come, invite to audition, because we may not be in that person's territory anytime soon, but we know that the next time we are, we'd like to see them live, even if we've already done evaluation based on their video. So there will be the culling of what's in the database and the invitations that come directly from applicants already in the database, and then the call out to the community to say, we will be coming to this city. If you're interested, apply online, and we will go through all of those, evaluate and vet the candidates, and send an invitation to those we think we want to see.
Gotcha. When you're looking at a video, because I've heard for different castings and different things, you know, you put your second best trick first and your best trick last and all of these kinds of things. How much of that is important for Cirque du Soleil? Because the difference, as I understand it, is the scouts who are looking at these videos understand the art form a lot better sometimes than what smaller companies or agencies would want or look for.
I think that's fair to say. I would add that almost without exception, all of our scouts come from the place they evaluate. Our dance scout was a professional dancer. Our athlete scouts were athletes of high level. Our circus scouts were professionals themselves. Same is true in music, all of our disciplines. So you can't really fool us. I'll tell you maybe first what not to do in a demo. Don't do slow motion, because that can't be replicated in real life. Doesn't matter to me how you look slow motion. It matters to me how you got into the skill and out, and what it looks like in real time, because that's how we see it on stage. I don't need to see the same trick 50 times from different angles. I need to see the full wealth of your vocabulary. So I like to say that demo tapes are they should be really, really simple, actually. It doesn't have to be strategic. It doesn't have to be about trying to be clever. I'd actually rather someone be very, very honest in their approach and have a particular skill that maybe didn't go perfectly that time when they ran their act, but it demonstrated to me that they continued on and got out of it comfortably and could handle a situation if it actually happened, because it probably will again in real life. Having something that's edited together to make you look like a rock star when we all know you're not quite yet a rock star, that's not helping anyone, because it's only the real deal on stage. There's no second tries. Well, sometimes there are, and they're strategic, but we know how that works in circus.
Yeah.
So It has to be simple. I like captations that are showing me everything. I like to see things that are unedited so that I can really see transitions. I'll often say, no matter what the type of act, that the transition supersedes the skill. It's how you get in and out of things that actually make an act. It's not just about look at this trick, look at that trick. We're well beyond that in today's 2020 circus. I need things to be clean and simple and clear and honest, and it really doesn't have to be strategic or clever. I do like to see, away from the representation of your skill set, I like to see a little personality. So if you're doing the presentation to camera, we'll often say maximum 1 minute, just tell us about yourself. And you can encapsulate a little bit about you. We get to hear you speak. We get to see how you hold yourself, how you carry yourself. Sometimes people will practice that because it's not something we do every day. So it's not a bad thing to rehearse it a little. But we don't want anything that isn't actually you. And that's why auditions are awesome, because it's really hard to fake an entire day or two.
Mm-hmm. Does professional experience trump a degree from a top circus school?
Great question also, because that's a very circus school specific, but I could switch circus school to performing arts school, dance school, music school, whatever. All experience is meaningful, and we don't prioritize one or the other. There is a small disadvantage unofficially in being self-taught, because it suggests that perhaps you've not actually benefited from coaching. And
Right.
Coaching is such a key piece of, in life, how we get better. And circus is finally coming around to that. It's quite a radical change from the old days where, when you look back through the history, you were learned into something, you grew into something, and you were sort of coached, but it was probably your father calling the cues and catching you out of the air and doing this and doing that. And it wasn't the same sort of standard of practice that we see in other sports that are progression based and really letting you evolve to your maximum potential. So if you are self-taught but come with toolkits that are perhaps like a sporting background or other benefits that will have helped you fast track in the world of circus, then that's great. The reality is we look at what you're capable of doing. How you got there doesn't actually matter, but we will scrutinize what it is that we've got to see where else can it go.
I see.
And that's the ceiling.
I'm thinking a bit about those, you mentioned the Brazilian kids tumbling on the dirt streets. I mean, that speaks to, they're not on tumble tracks, they're not on sprung floors, so the fact that they're throwing those tricks is nuts, but also, can they do that 10 shows a week?
Exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly right. And
Gotcha.
do they have, and it was a big concern that we had when we first looked at parkour. It was consideration certainly when we've been looking at stunt profiles and action sport profiles. Now, the beauty, just a total sidebar, action sports has actually more and more started to adopt traditional training practices because a lot of them are becoming Olympic sports. So in fact, it's not uniquely about let's throw this trick and crash 9 times out of 10. It's actually like, let's learn how to be able to throw this skill and probably get it within the first couple tries. They use foam pits and resi pits and different type of techniques now to actually let themselves learn a trick properly rather than throwing it enough times and getting enough concussions that
Right.
Suddenly they're out of the game. So we had a lot of learning to do in that area, but luckily they are starting to follow that process of building blocks, build it up to the place by progression that you can safely get to the place where it will be consistently happening the correct way, safely, 10 shows per week.
Yeah, what besides athleticism makes them a good choice? If performance experience is limited. Yeah, so how often, even when we're talking about, a kid who's fresh from ENC, do you like them to have a bit of stage time before you put them on stage? Or how much does previous experience matter?
It matters, but going back to the image, for me, it's the third layer. Mm-hmm. It could even be the fourth layer if we create a band in our graph, which, remember, it's technique foundation, and then it's human being and being a good one.
Yeah.
Artistry and potential for, and then performing experience, it's huge. At the end of the day, you need to know how to be in front of a public. You have to, that is something that is developed. Some people do have a lot of natural charisma and a lot of natural stage presence, but it is learned also, and it's nurtured, and it's something that you can grow into and continually evolve. And we don't expect people to have that immediately. That is partly why an artistic director and the artistic assistants are on the shows. They are directing their artists. Where it probably has the most meaning, and this is a very straightforward answer, is in the contract offer. If you come with lots of performance experience, you will fall into a higher pay scale category than if you come as a brand new graduate. No matter how good you are, we have a very defined scale by which we offer show fees to artists, not only by discipline, but by experience.
Oh, interesting. Gotcha. Oh man, that's like a whole other conversation that you've just opened. But because I want to stick it to casting, is there anything I didn't cover or any other advice that you would give to someone who wanted to be an artist to work for Cirque du Soleil? Be good, don't be a dick.
Don't be an asshole, just be awesome.
Yeah, cool.
I think the takeaway would be, it is remarkably in reach. And yet no matter how passionately I feel about a particular artist whom I've seen, or that exactly perfect special someone that I feel deserves it, this is live entertainment. Things change all the time. We're pretty fickle as an industry, and there's just not always a place for that amazing talent. I think you ask any one of the members of casting, what is their biggest regret? We hate being dream crushers. We hate it. I wish I could give all the deserving people a job. We actually legitimately believe that and feel that. There just isn't a place for everyone. And the advantage of being in such a big company is that we actually do have a lot of different shows and a lot of different show models, a lot of different kinds of special event-based opportunities versus long-term contract opportunities. There are a lot of jobs out there, but it's a really tough industry. It's competitive, but it's attainable. And the takeaway I want people to have is, it really is within reach, but you will not know if you do not try. And if you don't make the effort to do a good demo or stretch yourself and challenge yourself into a place of applying for that audition, even if you're not selected the first year, apply again when we come around the next time. It's attainable. And we have some beautiful stories of people whose lives have radically been changed because of stepping into this company and just, I guess, that sort of aha moment of, I have the entire world ahead of me. Yeah. And I never expected to be here.
Wow. I think there's also something very validating about saying that you can be amazing and there's just no place for you, you know? I think
in this company.
Correct,
I think the other thing that's important to note is this is one company.
Yeah.
I can speak to the tremendous amazingness of this company, but there's a lot of amazing companies. There's a lot of amazing opportunities out there. And I think as an artist, you need to just dedicate yourself to performing. It shouldn't necessarily be as limiting as, I want to perform only for this company. You know, it's a journey. There should be so many lefts and right turns happening along the way. For me, if it were a straight line, it would be awfully boring and you might have just gone into accounting. So, you know, it's one company, and we do have our goggles on. Like I said, we have our parameters and all of our needs and all of our values. A lot of really amazing opportunities out there for artists in general. You just need to dig your heels in and do the work.
Awesome. Stacy, thank you so much.
This was my pleasure.
So great. That was my interview with Stacy Clark. Stacy, thank you again for coming on the podcast. It was so great to answer some questions that even I had about this company and how they hire, how they seek talent, and how they do so in a way that feels equitable and at pace with the social issues of the day. I think that was kind of my favorite part of discussing with Stacy how Cirque du Soleil, or what steps they take to ensure that there is fair casting. And what I love about Cirque is that they really don't care what color you are, what gender you are, how many tattoos you have. If you are a great technician, if you are a very skilled artist athlete, by the way, how many times did Stacy say artist athlete? I loved it. If you're very skilled, there is consideration for you in the company. And sometimes Cirque and other companies, there's a lot of criticism because of the lack of representation, specifically in race. But I think the bigger question we have to ask ourselves is why, at the social level, are we not seeing more artists of color? Are we not bringing the same opportunities that Caucasians generally are exposed to other populations? And this is a question probably for someone of a more social circus leaning and something that I want to continue to explore. The other cool thing about interviewing Stacy, aside from just being able to ask her pretty upfront, pretty difficult questions, was that we did it at Cirque du Soleil headquarters. So I rolled up, I got my badge, I got to go inside and see all the amazing facilities that Cirque has. It's a LEED certified building, so it's environmentally friendly. The art on the walls is incredible. Their training spaces are state of the art. And what it showed me, and I think what Stacy's interview really gets across, is that Cirque du Soleil, guys, it's not a pipe dream. It's a real company, and they have real jobs, and they need artists. And something I love that Stacy said, she said that being a cast member in a show for Cirque du Soleil is really within reach, but you will not know if you do not try. And so, if this is your dream, I encourage you to submit an application in the database. The back end, as you heard in the interview, is very sophisticated. They look at videos, and through this interview, you learned how to create a great video of your skills and your technique and who you are as an artist. If you want to get in touch with Stacy or learn more about her personally, she is on Facebook. It's Stacy Clark. There's no E's in her name. And I don't think she'll mind me saying this because it is kind of public on her Facebook, but she has a very cute blog website called stacyandherback.wix. And the link to that is on her Facebook page. So go check that out because it's adorable. To find me online, for aerial training tips and inspiration, you can follow me on Instagram. I'm at _artist_athlete. As I said before, that's also sometimes where I collect podcast questions. I'm also on Facebook, The Artist Athlete. There is a Facebook group, Friends of the Artist Athlete Podcast. I check that from time to time as well. You can also visit my website, theartistathlete.com. It has all of my ebooks, all of the information, and a contact page as well. And most importantly, if you want to support the podcast, keep it going, keep it running, keep the lights on for my sound editor, my amazing assistant, Hannah, you can go to patreon.com/theartistathlete and become a Patreon today. Thanks for tuning in, friends, fans, and enemies. I'll talk at you next week. The Artist Athlete Podcast is supported solely by donations from people like you. Here's what some of those people have to say.
Aloha! My name is Beth Russell, and I live on the beautiful island of Maui, Hawaii. I am an aerial artist and movement instructor specializing in chakra yoga to keep me balanced and grounded. I play with silks, trapeze, lyra, rope, acro, aerial yoga and dance, slacklining, pole, bungee, and climbing. Really anything that goes up and allows me to explore 3D space. You can find my dedicated aerial page on Instagram at Maui Aerialist. If you find yourself coming to Maui, let's play.
Hey there, friends, fans, and enemies. This is Chris Alston, Patreon of the Artist Athlete Podcast, straps artist and lyra performer and acrobat out of Greenville, South Carolina. So if you're ever passing through, make sure to stop in and see me and my friends. We have a wonderful space, and we'd love to see you.
Hi, my name is Erica Lee. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, and I'm an aerialist. I teach performing arts to elementary school during the day and do pole and slings and rope by night. I really, really like the Artist Athlete podcast because it gives me a lot of circus goals to look forward to. It gives me a lot of insight on what's going on around the world in circus. And that's why I'm Patreon.
Hello, all. Thank you for tuning in to the Artist Athlete podcast. I am Opal Schwartz from Minneapolis, Minnesota. If you're ever in the cities, feel free to stop by the Aviary Minneapolis. It's a great time. With that, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week, and goodbye.
Hey there, artists and athletes. This is Andy Smith, owner and artistic director at Saltaire Circus School in Jacksonville Beach, Florida. And I want to thank you for contributing to the Artist Athlete podcast. If you ever find yourself down in Florida, come check us out. Whether you're an artist, athlete, or someone ordinary just looking to be extraordinary, we got a place for you.